On a chilly February morning in 2014, police in a quiet Virginia town launched a search for a missing college student. 21-year-old Sama McCresta, a devoted daughter and exemplary student, had disappeared after meeting up with a friend the night before. Her parents, who were used to hearing from her daily, grew deeply concerned when she failed to call. What first appeared to be a simple miscommunication soon turned into a disturbing mystery. Born in Nepal to Germani and Rajesh Cresta, parents who valued education and instilled a strong sense of tradition, Samima was raised with discipline and purpose. At the age of 3, Samima and her family made the life-changing decision to immigrate to the United States in pursuit of better opportunities. They made their home in Vienna, Virginia, a town known for its warm reception of South Asian immigrants. Samima adjusted quickly to her new surroundings. Although Nepali remained the language spoken at home, she rapidly picked up English and fit in smoothly at school. Her teachers recognized her impressive academic talents, while peers remembered her as joyful and compassionate. As she progressed through school, Samima developed a strong passion for science, particularly in the fields of biology and psychology, interests that would shape her future goals. A turning point in her life came with the devastating loss of her older sister, Manisha, who died in an accident. The tragedy left a lasting impact on the family, but became a source of motivation for Samima. She committed herself to a future in medicine, driven by the hope of helping others and preventing similar losses. In high school, she actively engaged in volunteer work, gaining valuable insight into the importance of healthcare through hands-on experiences. After completing high school, Samima enrolled at Virginia State University, where she pursued majors in biology and psychology. She quickly became known for her strong drive and exceptional organizational skills. With clear goals in mind, she approached her studies with relentless focus and dedication. Her ultimate ambition was to attend medical school and make a meaningful impact on others' lives. In contrast, Jessica Ewing came from a very different background. She was raised in Easton, Maryland, within a strict Baptist household governed by uncompromising religious values. Her early life was overshadowed by a traumatic experience involving the aggressive actions of a family friend, a painful event she never shared with her family. Instead, Jessica kept her suffering hidden, choosing silence over confrontation. When she eventually started college, she was eager to distance herself from the restrictive environment she grew up in and poured her energy into academic, majoring in both biology and aquaculture. Despite her efforts to move forward, Jessica continued to wrestle with inner turmoil. She began to recognize that her feelings for other women clashed with the strict beliefs she had grown up with, leading to an emotional conflict she found difficult to manage on her own. In February 2012, while attending Virginia State University, Jessica crossed paths with Samoma during a lecture. She was immediately drawn to Samima's vibrant personality and genuine warmth. As time went on, their interactions became more regular. They studied together, exchanged thoughts on scientific topics, and supported each other academically. For Samima, their growing connection was simply a reflection of her friendly and inclusive nature. But for Jessica, the bond quickly evolved into something more intense. Her feelings for Samoma began to extend beyond the bounds of ordinary friendship. Jessica's attention towards Samoma often felt unusually intimate, though Samoma, deeply focused on her studies and future goals, remained unaware that their friendship was becoming something more complicated for Jessica. What had begun as a simple, friendly bond was quietly evolving into something much more significant. Jessica increasingly looked for reasons to be near Samoma, while Samoma continued to treat their interactions as a normal part of a close academic friendship. At the time, no one suspected that this connection would eventually take a dark and tragic turn. The real conflict for Jessica stemmed from the fact that her feelings for Samoma weren't purely friendly. She found herself struggling with a growing romantic attraction, one that clashed with the rigid values she had been raised with. This internal battle intensified. On one side, she wanted to preserve the friendship. On the other, she was wrestling with emotions that she knew weren't reciprocated. Jessica did her best to conceal her feelings, afraid of being judged by others and rejected by Samoma. At the same time, Samoma began to grow close to someone else. She entered a relationship with Scott Maselli, an upperclassman on track for law school. What began as light conversation between them soon developed into something deeper. Scott was drawn to Samoma from the beginning, and despite her demanding schedule, she made time to nurture their connection. Their mutual support for each other's goals only strengthened their relationship. For Jessica, however, this new romance was emotionally devastating. She struggled with intense jealousy that she couldn't voice. Watching Samoma devote more time to Scott, choosing dates and outings with him over study sessions or conversations with her, left Jessica feeling hurt and left behind. Even casual mentions of Scott in conversation were painful reminders of the role she longed to have in Samoma's life. Jessica began to reflect deeply on her emotions, trying to pinpoint what made her so drawn to Samoma. She came to understand that her feelings went beyond admiration. It was a profound emotional attachment. At the same time, the weight of her upbringing pressed down on she continually reminded herself that her desires conflicted with the religious values instilled in her since childhood. Yet, no matter how much she tried to reason with herself, the internal struggle persisted. As these feelings grew more intense, Jessica became increasingly withdrawn, avoiding even her closest friends when it came to discussing her emotions. She felt isolated, convinced that no one around her could truly grasp what she was going through. Her journal became her only refuge, a private space where she could try to make sense of the pain and confusion. Even there, she held back, worried that her secrets might one day be uncovered. As the emotional toll mounted, it began to seep into her daily life. Jessica went out of her way to avoid Scott, steering clear of any chance encounters with him on campus. Jessica's avoidance of Scott was driven not only by jealousy, but also by the fear that he might sense her feelings for Samoma. At the same time, she tried to continue being a supportive friend to Samoma, but the mounting tension made it increasingly hard to interact with her as they once had. The situation was complicated by the fact that Samoma viewed Jessica solely as a friend. She felt at ease confiding in Jessica about personal matters and her future plans, but she never considered their relationship beyond friendship. For Samoma, her connection with Scott took precedence, and she focused on deepening their bond. This only strengthened Jessica's belief that her feelings were unreturned. In an attempt to manage her growing emotional turmoil, Jessica sought guidance from university counselors. Yet, despite these efforts, her emotional instability lingered. Every time Samoma mentioned Scott or spoke about their romantic plans, Jessica was engulfed with feelings of anger and resentment. She began to turn her frustration inward, blaming herself for her emotions. But despite her best efforts, she couldn't shake them. These emotional struggles set the stage for what would come next. Jessica's attachment to Samoma, fueled by jealousy and inner conflict, gradually transformed into an obsession. Her inability to resolve the emotional turmoil she felt would ultimately lead to tragic consequences. A moment in their relationship occurred during what seemed like an innocent conversation. While catching up, Samoma casually mentioned that she had never seen The Lion King. Seizing the opportunity to spend more time with her, Jessica suggested they watch it together. To Samoma, it was just a friendly offer, one she readily accepted. For Jessica, however, this invitation represented a chance to grow closer to Samoma and possibly deepen their connection. On the day they were supposed to meet, Jessica meticulously planned every detail of the evening, carefully curating the atmosphere to ensure it would be warm and inviting. She viewed this as a significant moment in their dynamic, a chance to take their bond to the next level. Samoma, on the other hand, approached the evening with her usual casual and relaxed demeanor. This difference in perspective became the first sign of how differently they interpreted their time together. What Jessica saw as a pivotal moment, Samantha saw as a simple movie night with a friend. As the film played, Jessica grew increasingly tense. Her focus wasn't on the movie storyline, but on Samoma sitting next to her. She felt it was the perfect moment to finally express her feelings. At one point, unable to contain her emotions, Jessica interrupted their conversation about the film and nervously leaned closer. She jokingly suggested they try a kiss, presenting it as a light-hearted idea. Samoma was taken aback, but didn't see it as a big deal. She interpreted it as nothing more than a curious and harmless experiment, driven by the playful nature of their friendship. Without giving it much thought, she agreed, seeing it as just another quirky moment in their interactions. For Jessica, however, this kiss was monumental. She saw it as validation of her hopes and believed it might mean her feelings were reciprocated. After that evening, their perceptions of the situation diverged drastically. Samoma resumed her daily life, treating the event as insignificant. She continued to interact with Jessica as she always had, unaware of the profound impact it had on her friend. Jessica, on the other hand, couldn't stop replaying the moment in her mind. She overanalyzed every word, every action, looking for hidden signs that Samoma might share her feelings. From that point on, Jessica's internal tension began to escalate. She slowly realized that Samoma didn't see her the way she had hoped. This gap between Jessica's expectations and reality left her feeling increasingly frustrated and disappointed. Attempts to bring up the topic with Samoma didn't yield the responses Jessica wanted, further fueling her emotional distress. Jessica's growing struggles led her to seek help from a university counselor who recommended she start a course of medication to stabilize her emotions. The prescribed treatment aimed to reduce her anxiety and help even out her mood swings. However, Jessica didn't notice significant improvement. The issue was that she wasn't entirely honest with her therapist about her feelings or the details of her relationship with Samoma. By withholding key information, Jessica made it difficult for her counselors to fully assess her situation and provide effective support. Jessica sought comfort in conversations with her friends, discussing her emotional struggles without explicitly mentioning Samoma. However, she began to notice that those around her couldn't provide the support she craved. Her accounts of discomfort were often dismissed as common complaints, and the advice she received felt generic and unhelpful. This only deepened her sense of isolation. Meanwhile, Samoma was becoming increasingly absorbed in her studies. After being accepted into the University of Pennsylvania's medical program, she focused on preparing for the next chapter of her life. Her schedule became more demanding and her priorities shifted toward academic and professional goals. She spent less time with friends, including Jessica, and concentrated almost entirely on her career aspirations. For Samoma, this period marked the beginning of her long-awaited dream to become a doctor. For Jessica, this growing distance was deeply painful. She interpreted it as a sign that their relationship no longer held the same importance to Samoma. Even their rare interactions brought little solace. Their conversations revolved around Samona's plans and academic progress, rarely touching on personal topics. Jessica felt increasingly sidelined, which only amplified her feelings of inadequacy. In this context, Jessica began experiencing obsessive thoughts about how to restore her connection with Samoma. She imagined various scenarios where she would confess her feelings or find ways to capture Samoma's attention again. However, every potential solution she envisioned seemed insufficient. At some point, Jessica started considering more significant actions to regain Samona's focus. One early indication of the events to come was a conversation Jessica had with a friend. She mentioned her desire to plan a special evening for Samona, one where they could have an open and honest conversation to resolve lingering tensions. She talked about the potential details of this meeting, but avoided specifics. Jessica hinted that the evening needed to be something Samona would remember for a long time. At the time, her words seemed innocent, but in hindsight, they took on a more ominous tone. On the evening of February 7, 2014, the two friends arranged to meet at Samama's home. Jessica had carefully prepared for the occasion, viewing it as a pivotal moment to rekindle their closeness. She chose an outfit she thought would be fitting for the special night and brought along wine and dessert, hoping to create a relaxed and inviting atmosphere. To Jessica, this evening was far more than a friendly gathering. It was an opportunity to express her feelings and perhaps receive the response she had long been hoping for. When Jessica arrived, her expectations were immediately shattered. Simona greeted her in casual attire, wearing simple pajamas and slippers with no hint of the celebratory atmosphere Jessica had envisioned. For Simona, this was just an ordinary evening spent with a friend. She planned to share dinner and conversation, but nothing more. This stark contrast in how they perceived the evening was the first blow to Jessica, who was already in an emotionally fragile state. As the evening went on, the tension between them grew. Jessica tried to steer the conversation in a direction that she hoped would bring them closer. She made subtle remarks about their friendship and how much Samama meant to her. But Samama, focused on everyday topics, didn't read into Jessica's words. At one point, Jessica cautiously shifted the conversation toward more personal matters, asking questions about Samama's feelings toward her. She phrased them carefully to avoid suspicion. But with every vague or dismissive response from Simona, Jessica's frustration grew. The breaking point came when Simona openly stated that their friendship had no romantic undertones for her. She explained that she had always seen their relationship as strictly platonic and that the kiss they had shared was nothing more than a moment of curiosity. For Jessica, these words marked the end of any hope she had been holding on to. Months of resentment and hurt came rushing to the surface. She felt humiliated and rejected, unable to accept that her feelings had been completely disregarded. The conflict escalated quickly, starting with raised voices. Jessica accused Samama of toying with her emotions and giving her false hope. Caught off guard by Jessica's outburst, Samama tried to calm her down, but her attempts only made things worse. Jessica's words turned into shouts and her gestures became increasingly threatening. Trying to defuse the situation, Simona suggested they end the conversation and wrap up the evening, but this only fueled Jessica's anger further. At some point, Jessica lost control of her emotions. She grabbed Simona, demanding that she listen. A brief struggle ensued, during which Jessica's frustration and hurt manifested in physical aggression. In an uncontrolled outburst, Jessica grabbed Simona by the neck and began squeezing. She didn't fully realize what she was doing until Simona stopped struggling. Only then did Jessica grasp the gravity of her actions. Her hands loosened and she stepped back, staring at the motionless figure before her. The moment of realization threw Jessica into a state of panic. She couldn't believe that her anger and feelings of betrayal had led to such a devastating outcome. She knew she had done something irreversible, and in the moments following the incident, her mind was consumed by chaotic thoughts about what to do next. One question echoed in her mind: what now? Her mind raced with chaotic plans, ranging from calling for medical help to completely hiding the body. Fear of being caught quickly took over, and she decided to act to cover her track. Jessica's first step was to hide the body. She found a sleeping bag in Simona's apartment, wrapped the body in it, and dragged it to Simona's car, which was parked outside. Jessica intended to stage the scene to look like a disappearance rather than a crime. However, the task proved too challenging for her alone. She called two acquaintances, Kiefer Brown and Michael Heller, asking for their help with what she vaguely described as handling a problem. She deliberately withheld the details of what had happened. When the two arrived, they immediately noticed Jessica's nervous demeanor. She tried to persuade them to help move the body without revealing the full story. Heifer reluctantly agreed, but Michael was more cautious, suspecting that the situation was far more serious than Jessica was letting on. Despite his reservations, they helped move the body into Simona's car. Jessica mentioned her plan to dispose of it entirely, but no concrete steps were taken that night. The following day, Simona's parents grew concerned when they couldn't reach her. Typically, she maintained regular contact with them, but this time their calls went unanswered. Alarmed, they reported her disappearance to the police. Authorities quickly launched an investigation. As Samima was a diligent student whose sudden disappearance was highly unusual, investigators focused on her last known evening and began identifying individuals who had been with her. Jessica knew she was a prime suspect as she was the last person to have seen Samima. Hoping to deflect suspicion, she voluntarily appeared at the police station with her attorney and her parents, claiming she wanted to cooperate. However, during questioning, Jessica refused to answer key questions, raising suspicions among investigators. Her evasive and odd behavior made her the primary focus of the investigation. Meanwhile, police conducted a search of Samima's apartment. They discovered evidence of a struggle in blood that indicated a violent encounter had taken place. This supported their theory of foul play. Shortly after, Simona's car was found and inside investigators discovered her body. Jessica's attempts to hide the evidence had failed, as several mistakes, such as physical traces left at the scene, quickly connected her to the crime. A few days after Samima's disappearance, Jessica was arrested. Her behavior during interrogations raised even more red flags. She contradicted herself multiple times and avoided giving clear answers. Both Kiefer and Michael were also questioned by the police. Kiefer admitted to helping move the body, but insisted he had no knowledge of Samima's cause of death. Michael, on the other hand, fully cooperated, telling authorities that he found Jessica's actions suspicious and had refused to assist her further. Jessica's arrest was the first step in uncovering the details of the crime. Her friends who had been involved in hiding the body also came under investigation. However, it was Jessica's missteps and erratic behavior that played a crucial role in the police to piece together the truth. As the investigation progressed, the facts became increasingly clear and her culpability grew undeniable. The trial began in February 2015 and attracted significant public attention. Prosecutors presented a substantial amount of evidence, including signs of a struggle in Samima's apartment, blood traces at the scene, and surveillance footage showing Samima's car being driven by Jessica on the day of the disappearance. A critical piece of evidence was the discovery of Samima's belongings in Jessica's possession, including her medical kit and personal photograph. During the trial, Jessica initially denied her guilt, claiming her actions were the result of an emotional breakdown. However, faced with overwhelming evidence, she eventually admitted her role in the crime. In her statement, Jessica described the motives behind her actions, explaining that her anger stemmed from feelings of rejection and humiliation when Simona made it clear that their relationship was strictly platonic. Jessica stated that at the time of the crime, she was in a state of deep emotional distress, which caused her to lose control. Psychological evaluations confirmed that Jessica exhibited signs of depression and emotional instability, but experts noted that she was fully aware of her actions at the time of the crime. This finding was crucial in the court's decision not to consider her mental state as a mitigating factor. Prosecutors emphasized that the crime had been committed deliberately, and that Jessica's efforts to hide evidence pointed to premeditation. The defense attempted to portray Jessica as a victim of her own internal conflicts, but the substantial evidence and her eventual confession weakened their argument. The court's verdict was decisive. Jessica was found guilty of premeditated murder and concealment of a body. She was sentenced to 80 years in prison with 45 years to be served without the possibility of parole. Additionally, she received an extra 5 years for her attempts to cover up the crime. Kiefer Brown received a lighter sentence for his role in helping to hide the body. He was initially sentenced to 12 months in jail, but his term was shortened to 28 days after he cooperated with law enforcement. Michael Heller was not charged, as he had refused to be involved in hiding evidence and had immediately reported his concerns to the authorities. The verdict evoked mixed emotions in Samima's family. While they felt some relief knowing that the person responsible for the crime had been held accountable, the irreplaceable loss of their daughter remained. After the sentencing, Samama's parents expressed their gratitude to the court and law enforcement for conducting a fair investigation. But they also acknowledged that nothing could ever bring their daughter back. The trial not only brought some closure to the case, but it also served as a harsh reminder of the critical need for early intervention in addressing emotional and psychological issues. In response to the tragedy, the university where Samama and Jessica had studied implemented a mental health support program, hoping to prevent similar events in the future. Samama's family, already having suffered the loss of their eldest daughter in an accident a few years prior, now faced the unimaginable pain of yet another devastating tragedy. This moment was marked by profound cruelty. The loss of Samama not only took their daughter from them, but also shattered their sense of security, trust, and justice. They were crushed by the realization that someone who had been considered a friend to their daughter could commit such a horrific act. Their grief was further deepened by the prolonged agony and an overwhelming inability to process the tragedy. The event left an indelible mark on the lives of those closest to Samama and sparked broader discussions about emotional resilience and mental health within educational and social environments. The tragedy highlighted the critical need for timely intervention when emotional crises arise. The story of Jessica and Samama served as a stark reminder of how repressed emotions, unresolved inner struggles, and a lack of emotional support can lead to devastating outcomes.